America had little to no bureaucracy on how companies and individuals interacted with each other and consumers interacted with each other. It was pretty much the companies and the consumer to deal with how they did business. This country was largely strictly Christian or predominantly Christian. And what we would see as conservative right wing today was the entire full-scale landscape. I don't care if it was Democrat or Republican. Back then in the 1800s, they were conservative. I want you to put the picture of America today in play with the rules and the functions of the 1800s. You have little to no buffer between companies and individuals and consumers. What is this mythical America that needs to be made great again? I think all of us have been asking that question really since 2015-16, the first time Trump came around. What is this mythical America that was so great at one point in time? What time period are we referring to? What did this country and the culture of this country really look like? I think now that he's into his second term, those of us that have a reasonable glance into history and have some context around the history of this country, not just from like a singular lens, but really just the broader scale promoted history of this country, from a political point of view, an economic point of view, and a cultural point of view, have a better picture of what that America looks like now in his second term, where he feels much more emboldened to implement his vision of America. So the first thing I want to touch on is the fact that Doge has been targeting the CFPB, and I'm going to allow this to snowball out into the broader picture of what I want to present to you in this conversation. So the CFPB, for those who may not be familiar, is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They were created 2007, 2008, or right after that crisis, as a buffer between companies and individuals, consumers, to kind of create a buffer or protection against predatory practices for the most part. That is a pretty broad scale term, but at the end of the day, essentially the goal is to try to protect consumers from companies that are marketing to them in illegal or shisty ways, or handling you in a certain kind of way, or abusing your information, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You would also deal with the CFPB for certain credit report related stuff sometimes, or, you know, inquiries or identity issues. There's a broad range of things that you would turn to the CFPB for as a consumer if you were dealing with certain negative, you know, encounters from a company. So they are about a $758 million a year operation from my understanding and my research. And Elon Musk and Doge has put them in the crosshairs to be assessed and potentially scrapped. Where does this lead to the bigger picture? Because if you look now, we are about, at the time of this recording, knocking on a month of, you know, since the inauguration. This is about a week or so off from a month. So it's not that long. And there's been massive shifts in how our government is functioning and how it's intending to function, and the way it's starting to reshape the country and the world as a whole. How does this CFPB story tie into the bigger picture of Trump's great America again, right? The CFPB is one of those yellow or red tape barriers that a lot of companies and obviously people who are in business, etc., more to the conservative side of the spectrum. The CFPB is this buffer between companies and consumers and how they decide to do business. And it creates a lot of red tape for companies to have to dance around how they deal with us, how they market to us, how they do business with us, how they treat us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How they exercise the power that they have as companies, especially the larger ones. This is looked at from the lens of conservative-minded Americans, free market, pro-capitalist Americans, as bureaucracy, as bullshit, basically. They feel as if the consumer can make the decision to protect themselves by choosing to do business with who they feel better or safer doing business with. In their lens, they look at it and say, well, let the marketplace decide. If that company is so bad, people will just find somewhere else to go. Keep the marketplace competitive. That's why they don't want a lot of monopolies and stuff like that. They want choice, and they want the consumer to have choices. So if you have illegitimate business practices, the consumer just can go to the next competitor. In the world that we're in today, I think we well understand that doesn't necessarily play out that way. A lot of companies are at a size and scope where we're semi-forced to deal with them or deal with just a few of them. And if they don't have some kind of checks and balances to monitor their behavior, we see how these companies function with all of the bureaucracy and red tape. We still see lawsuit and settlement after settlement for various forms of abuse. So you can imagine if there's no CFPB. You can imagine if there's, bureaus alike being wiped out. The greater vision that I interpret, and I don't know if he's ever said this, if he has, I haven't personally witnessed this, so I'm saying this off, freestyling. I'm saying this organically. The greater vision that I see for Trump version of a great America is pre-1900, and I want to tell you why I see it that way. If you are moderately versed in history, like in America, and I mean that from, again, not from a singular lens of being just black or just white or just this or just that. doing your best to try to look at the grander scheme of political, economic, and cultural America pre-1900, you will see a lot of similarities in the vision and the implementation of that vision in this presidency. So when you think about pre-1900, let's think of a handful of things that were not in place, and then we'll try to name a handful of things that were the case pre-1900. The first things, major things that were not in place as of pre-1900. I'm gonna go down the line as best I can. You did not scrap the gold standard, so we were still on the gold standard. So that was 1971. Nixon took us off. So you had that component. You did not have the Federal Reserve. That's 1913. You didn't have federal income tax. That's like 1934, like Roosevelt. You didn't have the welfare state. That's 1920s, 30s. You didn't have a lot of things. A lot of the civil rights era of the 1960s was not a thing. A lot of different things were not a thing in America at that time. You really didn't have much of a standing full-scale military pre-1900. It was a lot more of a militia situation. The government was a fraction of the size. America also did not have a negative deficit. It had a surplus, economically speaking. America had little to no bureaucracy on how companies and individuals interacted with each other and consumers interacted with each other. It was pretty much the companies and the consumer to deal with how they did business. You had major business, you had a lot of domestic production in America pre-1900. A lot of domestic production. Yes, there was trade, but America was really, from an energy point of view, oil had been discovered in the 1800s, if my memory serves me correctly, or at least at that time was really being pushed into as a fuel source, as an energy source. And this is, if you look at the things I'm saying, we got almost anywhere from 90 to 100% of our revenue at our peak in the 1800s from tariffs. That sounds familiar. The entire landscape of America that is being painted right now and pursued right now is eerily similar to 1800s. So I don't know about your perspective, but there's a lot to take away from that. A lot to take away from that. There's a whole lot of other things I can name in the 1800s that I'm not going to dig into in this video because that's a deeper conversation. I'm going to try to keep it economic as possible. But as you can see, there's some huge shifts. No Federal Reserve, no welfare state, no income tax, still on a full-scale gold standard. Dollars fully backed, no full-scale standing military, etc., etc., etc. A lot of huge headways, a lot of things are different. Just from the 1900s to the 2000s. We didn't get into the 2000s yet. We're literally just focused 1900 to 2000. About 4 or 5 major landmark differences in America, and a handful of things 1800 to 1900 in America. We had a surplus, economically speaking. We had totally different trade relations. Our military looked totally different. Political system looked totally different. Government was a fraction of the size. What in today's world, everybody was conservative. Everybody was conservative. This country was largely strictly Christian or predominantly Christian. And what we would see as conservative right wing today was the entire full-scale landscape. I don't care if it was Democrat or Republican. Back then in the 1800s, they were conservative by today's measures. When you look at how that plays out today, when you think about getting rid of income tax as much as they possibly can, creating the ERS, which is an external revenue service to pull money from countries abroad and other entities abroad, getting rid of the income tax, trying to create a sovereign wealth fund, trying to re-back the dollar or start to create a sovereign wealth fund that will be backed by tangible and real assets and even things like crypto, etc., Bitcoin. If you can follow what I've been laying out, there's a lot of similarities. The one thing I want to go back to the CFPB situation and go back to the economic, the money side of this. When you remove the red tape that these individuals see as hindrance to economic development and growth in the movement of money. When you think about the removal of income tax, I want you to put the picture of America today in play with the rules and the functions of the 1800s. You have little to no buffer between companies and individuals and consumers. You have no income tax. And in today's world, in today's America, you have a very healthy welfare state that if they get their way will be dramatically reduced or starved or completely starved at some point in time. When you think about not having income tax as a worker, the first thing you think is, okay, well, great, that's a lot more money back in my pocket. I get it. I'm a W-2 worker as well. So the first thing I see is 25, 30% of my money staying in my hands, in my proximity. What we don't understand about the American culture today is it's built around consumerism. It's built around, debt and consumerism. When you look at the grand philosophy of the stigma that Trump has and his party and his philosophical views, a lot of people feel like he's openly for the rich. And I don't think that's something he would dispute per se. I think he would make the argument he cares about the working and middle class, whatever that hypothetically is. But ultimately, I don't think he's going to run from the idea that he wants to embolden and empower the rich and further enrich the rich. When you think about us not having income taxes, the way our economy is set up right now, it survives off of us spending and borrowing a lot of money. What you're doing is you're pouring a lot more money back into American hands. You're creating more domestic production, which likely in theory creates more domestic jobs. You're getting rid of a foreign labor force, like a cheap foreign labor force. If you want to look at, our migrant situation, he's getting rid of, to some degree, a reasonable portion of those people who are doing a lot of the jobs and a lot of the work that we either didn't want to do or we were too expensive to hire for. So that creates more American jobs in theory. And then you turn around and say we don't have to pay income tax if that were to happen. I don't know how realistic it is, but let's just run with it to get a clearer vision of where this could head. You have a lot more Americans working. You have a lot more Americans with more money in their pocket. The working and middle class in particular, which the ones that the economy really leans on the most to spend money and borrow money. If we don't change see the difference in the 1800s, most people were very prudent and conservative with their money. There was no such thing as consumerism back then. People were still growing their own damn food. Like, people were still, managing their own land and property. Like, there was no consumerism. There was no door-to-door food delivery. There was no buying a bunch of stuff that, like cars and clothes. And there was none of that. The trends, that was not a thing back then. So you create an economic environment where the private market is more robust than ever. Government is drastically reduced. There's not any real buffer between businesses and consumers. Investors are going to be emboldened. Business owners, especially the well-situated businesses, will be emboldened. And consumers are going to have a lot more money in their pocket. We're going to have a lot more money in our pocket. Our borrowing capacity will pick up because we are going to qualify for more borrowing because there's more money in our pocket. We're going to qualify for more debt. So that leads to a situation where without the psychological shift of the 1800s to what we have today, you have an economic environment that's going to usurp a ton of extra wealth from working and middle class people and vacuum it right up to the top. You following? Does that make sense? When you stop and paint the picture, that's where this is going to head. If I was to just encapsulate this for you, that's where this is going to go. You're going to have a whole lot of people with more money in their hands, more spending capacity. If he's able to, limit or reduce income taxes on overtime tips or just get rid of income taxes altogether, more money in your pocket, more borrowing capacity, and more money, there's more cash to spend. Companies are going to make a fortune because I don't have the red tape around my marketing. I don't have it around my business practices. And the people that I'm targeting have more money in their pocket. They have more money in their hands. That is a different ball game from the 1800s to today in the 2020s. That's a different ball game because now I have psychologically ruined Americans with a lot more money in their pocket. And I don't have to pay income taxes as a corporation, little to no red tape or drastically reduced red tape. And my consumer base or the base that I'm lending to, etc., has a lot more capacity to function. So only thing that's going to happen is all of that extra wealth is going to get usurped to the top. Only the investors, the business owners will win. Those of us that are in the working class, that are in the middle class, that don't own, that don't invest properly, that are not in position, are going to be wiped out. And it's going to happen faster. It's going to happen faster. If he's able to successfully implement these changes and bring us back to anywhere near an 1800 style economy and political environment, that wealth is going to evaporate out of our pockets before we can blink good. It's going to be gone because we're going to have all of the means to spend and borrow ourselves into oblivion. And these companies are going to have all of the means to brainwash us into doing it more. They're just going to brainwash us into doing it more. It's only everything that you see now, after COVID, credit card debt debt is going over $1 trillion in consumers. And that was with all the buffers and guardrails that's in place. Imagine the red tape being largely gone. Imagine not having caps on the interest rates you can charge on credit cards, or at least having a drastically higher ceiling. Imagine being able to lend to people you normally couldn't lend to because of certain red tape and precautions. Like, if you stop and think about it, like if you seriously stop and evaluate what I'm telling you, this is going to be crazy. If he can accomplish any reasonable percentage of what he's trying to accomplish, it's going to be crazy, because there's going to be no buffer and there's going to be all the ammunition in the world. And inflation is likely going to go crazy. Asset prices will likely go crazy at some point. This is his vision, and the vision of making America rich again, making America the wealthiest country on the planet again. It's gonna funnel into assets. And only those who own, only those who invest and who own are gonna truly eat. Everybody else is going to spend and borrow themselves into oblivion that much faster, because you're gonna have that much more money in your pocket. And the first thing you're gonna do is have consumer optimism. You're gonna have no taxes, you're gonna have all of these different benefits. The first thing you're gonna do, most of us, is go spend money. Borrow and spend money. That's exactly what's gonna happen. And that's exactly what they want to happen. All that money is gonna go in the hand of the investors and the business owners. These company valuations gonna go through the roof, pushing the stock market further through the roof. Housing prices, because people are going, if he can get interest rates down like he wants to, and housing prices, like people are gonna be able to afford more home. Like, because they're gonna make more money and have more money in their pocket, and their borrowing capacity is gonna pick up. I'm telling you, I hope you following what I'm telling you. All I can tell you, for those of us that are in the working class, that are in the middle class, working class, etc., get invested best you can. Get in the stock market. Even I have to evaluate some level of crypto. I haven't to this point, but I have to consider it. And damn sure get your grip around either starting or owning a business, being a damn good investor behind some good businesses, or getting into real estate. Ideally residential real estate. Commercial may have some great opportunities too due to the circumstances around that. But all I can ultimately tell you from my seat, for those of you who have stuck out this far and that may be new, I am a banker of financial services. I'm in retail banking, and I've been in it for over 10 years. So I'm speaking from like a lot closer to firsthand experience from the financial side, not just a random dude. But I'm telling you, get invested, stabilize your income, protect your income, start and grow a legitimate business that can capitalize on this, or get your money and get your network close to people who are doing it already, to these businesses, and get your money tied in with them. And own as much real estate as you can pull off, at least a primary residence, ideally some rental properties. Find a way to get yourself some real estate, because the money is going to evaporate. All of that extra wealth that's going to get created is going to get funneled right up to the top. Telling you what's going to happen. If he gets to accomplish what he's looking to accomplish, even a decent portion of it, you don't have to get it all right, this is a decent enough portion of it, watch what's going to happen. Watch. The more money that's in our hands, the more borrowing capacity we have, the less income taxes we have. Is not going to go where, in theory, one would think it's going to go. People's savings is not going to skyrocket, not the majority. People's credit is not going to get repaired and fixed and debt get paid off. It's not going to happen that way. Everything that we're doing wrong is going to exacerbate itself. As consumers and everyday working class Americans, everything we're doing wrong, we're going to do it on 10, because there's more money and more fuel and more ammunition to do it. Comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know your perspective on this situation. Do you see what I see when we start talking about making America great again, at least from an economic and political point of view? Let me know what you think about that. Comment down below. Let me know what end of the spectrum you're on. You're a business owner, you're an investor, you're a W-2 worker, do you consider yourself middle class? Where are you at in the spectrum, and how do you see this playing out if enough of his policies get implemented? Comment down below. To all my pioneers, welcome back. To my new viewers, welcome in. I want each and every one of you to stay focused, stay in motion. I'll see y'all soon. This is my blueprint for financial empowerment and self-sufficiency. This is my blueprint for optimal health and body mastery. This is my blueprint for mental, physical, and spiritual momentum. This is my blueprint for prosperity.